Tim Linder here. I'm here to talk to you about timeline animations and specifically frame-by-frame animations utilizing the Photoshop timeline panel. So I've got a couple images here. One of them is kind of a progressing. It's called running start. And then the other one is a little bit more down the line called running.psd. So we'll start with the running start image here. And what I've got is a couple layers, one a white background and then a little sketch of a little cartoon kind of running. So if you wanted to create a animated GIF file, or if you wanted to create a frame-by-frame animation in a more traditional style, like onion skin type style animation, you could draw or scan in a drawing of your first frame of animation. And then the nice thing about Photoshop is either you can create a brand new layer on top of that and then maybe go back to your original layer and change the fill down a little bit just so that you can use it more like a traditional onion skin paper. And then go back up to my second frame of animation and I can go through and try and draw and paint that in using my original layer as an onion skin layer. Another thing that you could do without having to draw everything over again, if you were only going to change a portion of that image, as if you was going to be making the next step or so, is that you could take that original layer and you could duplicate that original layer instead of just making a brand new layer. And then on the duplicate layer, you can hide the original or bring the duplicate layer up to 100%. On the duplicate layer, what you might use is the eraser tool and erase what it is you're going to change. So if you're going to want to make his arm move down a little bit or change a little bit, but the head and everything else is going to change, you could just erase what portions you're going to modify. That way you don't have to redraw everything over. And again, you could continue to use the underneath layer as an onion skin so that when you do draw on this top layer, let's say his hand moved down a little bit on this next frame, I could use that original one as a reference point. Alright, so that's another way that you could do it. And one other way that you could do things is that you don't even have to redraw at all. Let's say his head tilted back or something like that. I could grab my lasso tool and I could make a selection of the area that I wanted to move and edit, transform, or Command T and rotate this a little bit back. Maybe his head rotates back just a touch, and I'll move that with my arrow keys or something like that. Just a subtle movement back on that frame. I'll deselect or Command D to deselect that. So I could do a couple different animations. I could even come in here and do filters if I wanted to, or maybe use my liquefy tool to make modifications or movement from frame to frame. So from frame to frame, you could go through and create this traditional onion skin animation, and that's when I'm going to jump to this running.psd because I'm going to show you, more complete. I'm not going to have you watch me draw all these different frames in my animation. So I'll go through and I'll take a look at what my different frames look like, and you'll also notice that as I highlight them, I can kind of see things moving, but it really isn't going as fast as I would like. If a quick key combination, once you've created all your layers or frames of animation, is if you hide all your layers except for one, and you only have that same layer that is visible, if you only have it active, so I want to make the same layer visible and the same layer active, and then I can hold the command and then the bracket, not the command keys, the alt or option and the bracket keys, and I can move the brackets next to the P on the keyboard. I can cycle through my layers of animation, or my layers, just so that I can see them very quickly and see what it looks like. So forward bracket, or back bracket, while holding alt or option will allow me to go through and kind of visualize what that frame-by-frame animation looks like. Now, in order for me to output it as a movie or I'm going to output it as a GIF in this specific example, what I'm going to need to use is the timeline animation menu. So I'll go up here to Window, timeline and open up my timeline animation window. So down here at the very bottom, what I'll do is I will choose to there may be an intermediate button in here where I might want to choose frame by frame animation that goes right here. Notice if I choose a new file where I hadn't actually brought that up before. Notice I'll have in my timeline it says create new video timeline. I don't want that button. I want a frame by frame animation if I'm going to be animating in this way, and so I'll choose frame by frame, and that's when I would get my first frame. So in this running start, that's how I got to that point. I wanted to choose frame by frame animation mode, or in this one where I have all my animations. So right now I only have one frame, and that first frame looks like this. It is layer 1 is visible. So if I want a second frame of my animation, in my timeline panel down here, I'll click on my new frame, and now I've got a new frame here. And in my second frame, I don't want this layer visible, I want this layer visible, all while keeping layer 2 visible. So what these are down here are an indicator when I select them of which layers are visible at any given time. And there could be multiple layers, so there could be a color layer in between that had the color of this painted in. So I can jump back and forth as I select these. You'll notice that the eyeball changes and this one's visible now. So I can change my next, or create a new layer here, a new frame, I'm sorry, and then in that new frame just to go through and have the next layer visible. New frame, new layer visible, new frame, new layer visible, and so on all the way through until I'm finished. New frame, new layer visible, new frame, new layer, and then the last. Now another thing that I might like to do on this animation is visualize it here, or preview it before I go through. So before I want to preview, I'm going to look down at all these animation frames, and I'll see that each one of them is going to hold for 10 seconds. So that's going to make for a pretty long animation if each of these frames is 10 seconds long. So I probably want to change this 10 seconds to something like 0.1 second delay. And if I wanted to change them all, I could hold shift and select them all and then change them all to 0.1 second delay. And then if I wanted to preview what it looks like, I could hit this little play button right here and play, and it'll play through and preview what my animation looks like. And also notice that since this says forever right here, it's going to loop forever through. It's just going to keep looping over and over again. So I'm going to go ahead and hit stop. Now another thing that I could do is I could use multiple layers over and over again. If I wanted to start over and say, okay, in frame 10, if I wanted to go backwards, you know, have them step backwards, I could do that. Frame 10, frame 11, go back down the line. So I could create these animations however I want, whichever layer is visible. So all I do is I create a frame, I select that frame, and then I decide which layers are visible in that frame. And I can also get rid of layers or frames as well if I just drag those over here to the trash can. So I can drag my frames over here to the trash can and get rid of them, the new ones that I created, if I don't like them. Now lastly, if I wanted to output an animated GIF file, let's say I wanted to do that. Now a JPEG, it can't support animation. A Photoshop file can support an animation, so I would probably choose File Save, so that if I wanted to reopen this and change around my frames in my timeline animation, I could. But I can output a GIF file by going to File, Save for Web, and it will also support animation. And notice that in my presets, GIF is selected. JPEG, if I have JPEG selected, notice down here at the bottom where it says animation, if I choose any one of these other options, I'm not going to have that animation available to me down here. So if I wanted to have this GIF file loop forever, if this is a logo animation or whatever it might be that I'm going to put in a web page, I could change that. I could play through it here if I wanted to, and I could hit save when I'm finally done and save this as an animated GIF file straight from within my Save for Web dialog box. So one other thing which we'll talk about in another video is that if I wanted to file, export, render video, I could export this as an MOV file, playable in some sort of a movie player file. QuickTime on the Mac is what we would probably use to play it. So right now we're just going to concentrate on the GIF file, and in another video I'll show you how to export to an MOV file.